Hi, my name is Anne Marie Principe, and on 9/11, I was walking to my small business downtown um, when the planes hit the towers. At the time, I was 42 years old. I am now 64, going on 65. I think lots of people don't like to say that they're going to be 50 or 60. It's really a kid thing. I'm 13 and a half, but I'm 64 and a half, and I'm happy to be 64 and a half at this point because of the journey that I've been on. I feel such gratitude to still be here. Um, for me, I had such a different life. I had a boutique model and talent agency downtown on Greenwich Street. I'd actually just moved my company there 3 months prior. Um,
Wow.
so that was definitely something interesting. And my talent, my models worked all over the world. Girls as young as 13 up to women in their 50s and 60s. And I loved my little company. Um, and I really cared for the people who worked for me. But it wasn't anything that was making a difference. And I came to learn that after September 11th. And so for us, um, we weren't close enough to be destroyed, but we were in what was called the military zone. And I think a lot of people have no clue that that's what happened in New York City. We had military vehicles in the street. We had the Air Force, the National Guard, we had the FBI. I walked through, there was actually a statue of an angel, a peace angel that you walk past to get into Ground Zero, which was oddly appropriate to have that angel there. But we'd walk past 10, 15 men across the street, armed men, people in hazmat suits. We had a morgue outside of my office. Um, it was a very surreal, really dark place. And I think for me, I was still in such shock from that day. I just went back in the next day. I wasn't sure what was left of my building or my company. Um, so little was known at the time, and they were concerned for the structures. They didn't know how safe the buildings were because of all the buildings that had come down.
I'm
And so,
surprised they let you.
I will shamefully admit that I had long blonde hair and even longer legs, and I wore a really short dress, and I got through the military. I really needed to get through. And I was explaining to them, I said, look, I have a company and I have, you know, so many young women that work for me, and so many of them are here from other places in the US. And I don't have phone numbers to get through to them because at that time our communications were down.
Mm.
Many phone lines weren't working. Our cell phones were down because the microwave units for the cell phones were on top of the towers. So we lost a lot of the ability to communicate. And as a parent myself, I had a 5-year-old daughter. I couldn't imagine what these parents were thinking, knowing that's where my office was and not hearing from their girls. So I appealed to the men at this barricade and said, look, I have all of these young girls living here in New York City whose parents have not heard from them. I need to get into my office and get those phone numbers and be able to communicate with these parents so they know their kids are safe. Um, and it was just such an incredibly desolate place. There were few civilians in the street. Um, any of the residents had been moved out of the area. Some of the businesses were allowed in, like myself. And our neighborhood was quiet to begin with. It wasn't, it didn't have the hustle and bustle of the rest of New York City, which is what I loved about Tribeca. Um, I knew the guy in the print store and the little deli, and it was a real neighborhood feeling. It was very sad to see those businesses empty. Um, Nobody was allowed in. Nobody wanted to come in. Nobody wanted to see that. I can say that of all the people and companies I knew, only one producer from Warner Brothers ever ventured past that barricade to come into ground zero. Nobody wanted to experience that. And I
Wow.
really couldn't blame them. And it was so hard because we didn't know what to do. We didn't have phones. We used fax a lot at that time. So, of course, our fax didn't work. Um, Most of our equipment was getting destroyed from the dust. You had a fine layer of dust all over everything. I was already starting to feel sick from the dust of that day. I couldn't breathe right, but I had this company that was my livelihood, and I couldn't just let it go. And week by week, they would offer the city or federal government offer help to the residents, to the first responders, but not to the people who had small businesses. And there were 12,000 small businesses downtown.
Wow.
And I really started to lose hope because agency after agency would turn us down and say, no, we're sorry, we're not helping the small businesses. And finally, we had one forum where it was every agency in the city and all the utility companies, Verizon and Con Ed, and the people who tear the streets and sanitation. And they promised us that they were going to have ideas and grants and help available to us. And when we got there, it was kind of like a jury. It was 12 people, and none of them had anything for us. It was, we had $10,000 and we gave it all away. I don't know what they thought $10,000 was going to do for 12,000 small businesses. Um,
Right.
Con Ed couldn't tell us when they could bring the electric back up. Verizon knew that their wires and their infrastructure had been completely destroyed. They had no idea how long it would be before the phones would get up. Our mail had been anthraxed. So
Mm.
literally, we weren't getting our mail. And one by one, they told us how they couldn't help us. And I went back to my office and I just wept. I was just so upset. I thought, here I am. I'm 42 years old. I have this successful company. That's my livelihood. And it is dying. I'm losing it in front of my eyes and through no fault of my own. And I got angry. And angry was good. And I met a group of other small businesses and two attorneys who wanted to form a group to help the small businesses. And I thought, I have nothing to lose. And I actually found the place I was always supposed to be. I had a voice, I was always well spoken. I was never afraid to speak up. And that's a huge piece of what this required. It was going to city council, going to our senators, our congresspeople. And I was extremely naive because I thought they're going to help us because that's the right thing to do. And that wasn't the case because even today, the city still denies us any kind of information because nobody wants to be held liable for us or what happened to us. So the city refused to look at us, the state refused to look at us. The federal government was really afraid they were going to be responsible for us, and there was no one for us. Carolyn Maloney was one of the first people, Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, who started to speak out about the toxic effects of 9/11 and what was going to happen to us. And most of us believed her because we were already getting sick. Hillary Clinton joined that fight, and slowly other legislators came to support us. There was one city councilwoman, Margarita Lopez, who was also instrumental in helping us to get funds to clean up the streets. Um, but for me, somewhere along the way, I realized that my company was not where I was supposed to be anymore. I had something different to do. Um, and I just felt like all of my energy and focus needed to be there. And it was definitely sad to walk away from my company and walk away from, the people who worked for me. Um, but I just felt like I had something so important to do. And for me, that launched 22 years of advocacy, of working on Capitol Hill, fighting for healthcare rights, fighting to get money for the businesses downtown. And I think one of the things that's made it really hard for people like me as a small business is that the civilians were often left out of this conversation. Um,
Mm.
the bills are called first responder bills. They're named after first responders, and you know what? Those men deserve that. I knew some of those men, but at the same time, people only saw the first responders. Those were the men who worked on the pile. Well, there were women who worked on the pile, countless women who worked on the pile, who also gave their time and became sick. And it's really unfortunate that women in particular are often left out of the conversation. It's led to inequities in our healthcare with the program, where many of the male reproductive cancers were covered instantly. Anything that the first responders found were covered instantly. We literally only had uterine cancer covered last year. So, after all these years, women's reproductive cancers are finally being included, but that left out so many women. In addition, like myself, I had a 5-year old daughter, and my daughter used to come with me to work because it was my company. My daughter got sick. Um, no one thought about the children who got sick. And even though they included her in the program when it first opened, our healthcare program, they didn't have a pediatrician for her. So
Mm.
the doctors legally couldn't see her because she was a PEDS patient. And there
Wow.
were 19,000 children downtown. So all of those kids were left out of the equation. Pregnant women were left out of the equation. I have a friend, Deb, who was pregnant at the time. She worked financial analyst, and she gave birth 3, 4 months later. And her daughter has had constant health issues that we attribute to 9/11, but no one will recognize that. And, you can think about people will tell pregnant women, don't drink, don't smoke. Those women inhaled toxic dust and ash. How
Mm.
could their children not be sick? Those children are still not covered by our program.
Yeah, I mean, just from that day, like that time specifically, why do you think they left out women and children? Because if they included them, it'd be too much of a financial burden? Like, what do you think was the
No, I
perspective?
think that a lot of the focus was and still is on the first responders. And that's not to take anything away from those men and women who were the first responders, the cops, the firefighters. But people fail to see that it was lower Manhattan that was hit. And that included women and children, residents, and the small businesses. But the best stories for people were the first responders. They rushed in, they saved people, they went to work on the pile. But there were sheroes too. Um, One of the women that I came to know through a clinic where we were all being treated because we were sick. Her name is Susan Ryan. Susan worked on that pile alongside her longtime life partner. She was on that pile for 8 months. She's never received recognition that the other first responders did, and it cost her partner his life.
Wow.
Lynette Miller um, was a volunteer for the Red Cross. She worked 8 months, handing out bandages, bringing food, wiping people down, wiping surfaces down. No recognition. There's a whole group of women: Sonia Agron, Jade Markwell, Jeb Jackson, Frida Marco. These women worked at the pile or around the pile, and they're sick, and they're never recognized. There's nothing in the museum to recognize the women who worked on that pile.
Well, it was interesting when we first had our, I think, initial chat. You were saying something along the lines for every first responder, there's like 5 women there with food or wiping them down or like helping in some way. And it was the first time that I heard that. And it's sad that that was the first time I heard that because the story is always focused on first responders, which again, to your point, they
Yes.
deserve it. But, like, why isn't the other part spoken about more? It's frustrating.
And that's just it, because part of why I wanted to do this podcast with you is that I have told my 9/11 story many times, and I think a lot of people know that story at this point. But there's another story there, and it's all the women who were part of this, who are not recognized, who are not acknowledged, and who are not treated. There's another woman, Beth Cap, who actually did massage therapy. She was a physical therapist. So these men came to her, and women covered in dust and ash, and she worked on them. And she's sick right now, and she cannot get help in Florida where she lives. And half the time, people ask her, well, what did you do down there? They never ask the men that. They never
Mhm.
ask the men, what did you do? For me on Capitol Hill, often the reps would say to me, oh, you came with your husband. That's so nice. And it was like, no, I was there when those towers came down on my head. It's not nice. And yes, I'm here supporting them, but they're my colleagues, they're my peers. And that's what I need people to understand. The women are their colleagues, we're their peers. We contributed equally, we spent as much time down there, and we're left out of this. Often on Capitol Hill, the women would be asked ridiculous questions. One of the EMTs was asked what she was going to do with the money if she got the money. And they asked her, was she going to buy shoes for herself?
What?
Shoes. Because that's what women do, we buy shoes. and, and those kind of insulting things came at us all the time. I don't think anyone ever asked the men if they were going to buy Nikes or PlayStations. Um, and certainly
Yeah.
nobody ever asked the men if they were my husband or my life partner. And it's just so typical in how women are looked at in the workplace. This came from even when I was a little girl. I came from a very large family, and my parents were extremely progressive. From the time I was little, I wanted to fly airplanes. And my mom and dad never said to me, girls can't do that. Um, Lots of other people did. I can remember, people say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I say, I want to be a pilot. I want to work for NASA. Um, or people would say, oh, you want to fly. And I say, yes. Oh, that's so nice. You want to be a stewardess. Nobody ever looked and said, oh, she wants to be a pilot. I played the drums. People would say to me, don't you want to play the piano? Drums are loud, they're for boys. And I think I am here in this place today because I was blessed to have parents that didn't do that to me, and never, ever put up a barrier and said, you can't do this because you're a girl. Um, and I
Yeah.
think about that now, that they were kind of training me for this. This is what I would face my whole life. And at this point, this is 2024.
Yeah.
I'm going to be 65 years old, and there's still this fight for women to be equal. And this one is particularly egregious because it's our health. How is it that our health is not counted as equally important? Do you know we don't even have a gynecologist on our board for the World Trade Center
Wow.
healthcare program? Not one female reproductive doctor. And I take a man even. I just would like one one gynecologist on board, since we have thousands of reproductive cancers. And and all you have to do is look at that board and see that the women are still not being counted. We need a pediatrician on that board, someone who understands toxic exposure to the unborn. Considering we have representatives who are so concerned about embryos, I'd like them to be more concerned with the children that are here right now.
Yeah. Well, it's so have they not even tried to get those people on the board? I don't understand why.
Now, I myself have attempted to be on the committee, and the committees are very incestuous at this point. Um, a lot of them are people who are paid by the program. So they get money from the program to do outreach and education, and then they sit on that committee. And for me, that's a serious conflict of interest.
Hmm,
You can't be paid by a program and then advocate for the people who need to be taken care of.
hmm,
There needs to be separation there. Um, I had applied to be on the committee. I had letters of support from two congresswomen. Um, Certainly, I have been an advocate for 22 years, a very outspoken one, a well known one who's connected to the women who worked at Ground Zero, the moms, the children. And I did not even receive any kind of acknowledgement that I had submitted myself for that or from the two congresswomen who submitted for me. And I believe it's because I am so outspoken. Recently, I've had care denied me from the program, and I feel that that's retaliatory. And people said to me, you really should stop. You've got to take care of yourself, but I'm not going to stop. I'm not made that way. Um, this just fuels me more. And it also proves to me that what I'm doing is right. That this program is saying we need to shut her down. We need to
yeah.
stop her from talking. And if we take away her health care, then she's going to stop. But that's
That's
not what
so
we're being.
messed up.
Yes, it is. I was actually, I had my breast cancer reconstruction surgery scheduled for January 17th. It had been approved back in August by the program. I received a call from my surgeon 5 days before that my surgery had been canceled, but the hospital said if I paid them up front, me personally, they would do the surgery. I spent the weekend reaching out to the head of the CDC, the head of the program, Senator Gillibrand, and finally, Monday at 5 p.m., 14 hours before my surgery, they approved it. Um, and that was a terrible way for me to go into surgery. This is probably my 10th or 11th surgery. And so I've tried very much to, I go and I do yoga, I do mindfulness, I do breath works that I'm really calm. And instead, I was just so incensed that this is what they were doing to me. And all I could keep thinking of was, I am clearly doing something right, that they are coming so hard at me. And it's like, you can give it all you've got. I'm not going away. They cut
Yeah.
off my physical therapy 2 weeks ago. I'm supposed to be in physical therapy since my surgery. They cut off my physical therapy. They said it's not in network. That's
Wow.
the new excuse a lot of us are hearing, not in network. Um, and so I'm just looking to reorganize the women, some of the women I named, and some new friends I've made along the way to make this plea for women's health care to be noticed, acknowledged, and approved.
So I want to hear like more about what you're going to the Hill now for. But first, on the note of health, I'd love to hear more about your health journey. Like, what was the first time you got sick? I know you've had 11 surgeries, so it's going to be a long, like, maybe let's high level
Yeah,
summarize it.
the big bang ones. So for for quite some time, I used equipment to breathe. I couldn't
Mhm.
breathe without equipment. My lungs were just so bad. I would cough up ash. Ash would come out of my skin, like you would sweat
Wow.
ash. It was not just physically sickening, it was emotionally sickening because you knew what that was. It's
Yeah.
you got ash coming out of your skin. And I went through a special alternative medicine program, a detox program ran by this incredible Air Force surgeon, Dr. David Root. And that helped a lot of us to rid the chemicals and the toxins from our body. And so for a time, I was getting better. I was feeling well. I don't think any of us knew what was coming. Maybe we suspected we were going to get really sick, but I don't think we ever thought we'd be like this 22 years later. And
Mhm.
probably somewhere late 2004, I started to have horrific headaches, and it wound up that I had a growth in my brain behind my right eye, taking my sight, my movement, and it was inoperable because of my lungs. So even though my lungs had gotten better, they were only at 75% capacity. And anesthesia is the most difficult, dangerous part of neurosurgery. And they couldn't find an anesthesiologist who would do this for me. It was too dangerous. And so it left me with an inoperable growth in my brain. And basically, I was told that at some point I would start to have seizures. Um, the growth would explode. It was an arterial growth. And if I
Wow.
didn't get to a hospital and a surgeon within 2 hours, I would pass. Um, and I found a surgeon who was very progressive. And he said to me, I can do this, but you're going to need to do this awake,
Oh
via
my
twilight.
god.
And my choice was to either go ahead and do this, to attempt this, or to pass. And my daughter by that time was 8, and I was a single mom. And I said, I can do this. I can definitely do this. And I did. Second most surreal experience in my life next to 9/11, to be in an operating room, fully awake.
Like, did you feel it? Like, what?
I didn't, and they kept asking me that because they were so concerned that, I was going
Yeah.
to feel this and I was going to move. I had a halo, um, literally drilled, screwed into my head so I wouldn't move. I didn't feel anything. I felt like I was in such a zen place that I had prepared myself so well for this. I was strangely calm. The residents at Columbia, where I did this, were all freaked out. And they kept saying, Do you know how weird this is for us? Like, we have a patient talking to us while we're doing this. And it was like, you guys just took a Black and Decker to my skull. And now you've got a drill in there, and you think it's weird for you. Come on. This is, this is just unbelievable. And,
How
I
long was it?
the surgery was about 6 hours. It was about
Wow.
6 hours. And afterwards, it definitely hurt. But during that surgery, I can tell you, I didn't feel a thing. No pressure, no pain, nothing. Um, and, that was incredible for me. Um, I think it even drove home the point that I had something really important to do. My doctors kept saying to me, "You're here for a reason. There's no question that you're here for a reason." I still see my same neurologist. Every time he sees me, he says, "Doing something good?" Yes, yes, sir, I am. um, and I intend to stick to that. And then for a while, I was well again, and then in February of 2018, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Um, and I have to say, it's probably something I suspected was going to come at some point. I think all of us got to a certain point in time after 15 or 16 years, and we saw how many people were getting cancer, that it was just, it's a matter of time. Is
Right.
it going to come now? Is it going to come later? It's going to come. We have 68 cancers that are now approved through this program. So there are 68 different cancers. And those are not very good odds. Um, and
Yeah.
once again, I chose something different and holistic. I did go through a double mastectomy, which was definitely traumatizing and challenging. Um, and I was told I needed to do chemo and radiation. And having walked the halls with a bunch of first responders who got cancer and and used chemo and radiation and still died, I decided I was going to try something different. And I used all holistic medicine. I didn't do
Wow.
one dose of radiation, not one round of chemo. And at this
What
point,
did that look like?
it looked like I did hyperbaric oxygen because cancer robs your cells of oxygen. So I used hyperbaric oxygen, and the VA actually uses hyperbaric oxygen right now. I took all kinds of vitamins and minerals. I used an infrared sauna. I still use a sauna. I'm every morning at the gym where I work out. I use a sauna. I believe that removed toxic chemicals from my body. I still do. Um, and look, I don't know. I can't be for certain. No one can if my cancer is gone or it will return. But I know people who did chemo and radiation and their cancer still returned. And for me, it was quality of life. I I wanted to be able to see my daughter graduate college, get her first job, um, be here and be present. That was really important to me. And like I said, I am now 6 years out, coming up on 6 full years, and I've been able to do so much good, work on other bills. One of the things I'm working on right now is a group. There's 50 organizations, the VMHLC, um, and what we're doing is working for the rescheduling of psilocybin for mental health treatments. So for veterans, first responders, and basically anyone who suffers from mental health issues, because we found, I know for me, to go and sit with a psychologist is often just re traumatizing for me. To have to talk in depth constantly about what happened to us, what continues to happen to us, because this keeps going for us. This didn't end for us that day. You know, this is 2024, and I'm still dealing with the after effects of 9/11, and there just isn't any psychologist who can fix that for me. I'm sure there are a lot of pills that I could take. I've never been a pill popper. I'm not big on medicine unless I have to take it, unless it's something absolutely necessary. And I learned about psychedelic therapy about 6 months ago and was very fascinated by it because many of the men and women who've done this swear by it and say it's not just a temporary fix and it's not something you have to keep doing. It's literally a cure. And last week, I walked the halls with a group of men and women who were doctors, scientists, veterans, first responders. And each one of them had a story about how this saved their mental health. Um,
Wow.
in our community, I know we're starting to have people who have suicidal ideations. And that's because of the fact that we have no care. And it's the same for the veterans. They come home, they're not taken care of, they're left untreated. And so we're a good peer group together. We understand one another really well. And we do know that something has to change. What we have isn't working. If you have 44 veterans a day committing suicide, you're not doing this right. And you need to be open to change. And we're finding that we've had some pushback on Capitol Hill, but more and more we're starting to see them responding, coming around to this is not such a bad idea. We've already got 14 co sponsors on the bill. I believe we're going to have anywhere from 6 to 10 more coming this week. And I'm hoping that we can do this. And it's just really simple. It's just rescheduling psychedelics for mental health treatments. It doesn't decriminalize, it doesn't mean that you can sell mushrooms on the street. It
Right.
means that you do this under the care of a psychiatrist and a physician. So you're watched by the doctor and you're guided by the psychiatrist or the psychologist. And and this is very important to me. And then the second thing that I've been working on is for me, when I was first diagnosed with breast cancer, um, look, as a woman, you really don't want to have to go through that. You know, what a horrible, traumatic thing to have to go to. And so I did research to see, were there other treatments? Was there anything new? And there was, and it was really unique. And it's a cryo um, sort of therapy. What it is they take liquid nitrogen and they inject it into the tumor and it blasts it, much like a kidney stone. And so I was fascinated by this. And I was like, I want to find out about this. How does this work? And once again, what do we come to? Not approved for treatment for breast cancer here in the US. So the FDA has approved it for lung cancer, kidney cancer, prostate cancer, not breast cancer.
Wow.
Um, I had the option, if I were indeed eligible for this, to pay for it, cash out of pocket. And actually, I would have. The treatment was $10,000. And considering what I've gone through over the last 6 years through conventional breast cancer therapy, I would have done that in a heartbeat. Um, Unfortunately, I wasn't a candidate, but I did contact the company because I wanted to see, how do we get this to women? How do we get this to other women so that maybe it can help them? And so I have been in discussions with them. And back in December, um, they were disappointed because the FDA had turned down their request to approve this treatment for breast cancer. Um, and I saw that and I was so upset. And I thought, how can they turn this down? Why is it that this can't be under right to try like other new cancer treatments? And how can it be right for one cancer, but not for this cancer? And so I went on my breast cancer support group and I reached to the women there and I said, if I do this, if I reach to the FDA, will you do this with me? And they embraced it. And so I created a little blurb for them to call and say, I'm a breast cancer patient, I'm a breast cancer survivor, and we really want you to consider the appeal of this company. And I got a call from the FDA after about a week, and it was a young woman, and she said to me, "Who are you, and what are you doing?" I said, "I'm someone who went through breast cancer, and I wish I could have done this treatment. And you're denying this to 200,000 women who could use this treatment instead of a surgical procedure. It's done in office. Literally, you just go into an office, they do a little numbing, you get the shot, you're done. That's it." I was like, I'm 6 years into this. I'm still going through reconstructive surgery. I still have emotional health issues from this. It's very difficult to look at my body and railroad tracks across it and not be reminded every day of what I've been through. And she revealed that she actually had a sister who had passed from breast cancer. So this was very fascinating to her. And
Hmm.
she said to me, "But why are you doing this? It's, you can't do this." And I said, "Yes, but there's a lot of other women who can." And then she asked me about the other women and she said, "So none of those women who've called can do this treatment." I said, "No, they can't. They just want it for other women." And within 2 hours, the FDA called the company and said they considered the appeal and they will get passed probably within the next 2 or 3 months. So that was an incredible win for us.
Wow.
Really incredible.
That's amazing.
Yes.
So those are like the primary 2 things you're going back, because I know there was a huge push in 2019 where everyone was going down, and now there's
Yes.
still things happening, but it's not on the media as much as it was. So are those the 2 of the main
You
things
know
that are
what,
happening?
Christina, sadly, it's not in the media because so many people think this is done. And for many of the first responders, it is. For those who are in the national program, they're just not taken care of. Um,
Hmm.
but people are so tired of having to do this um, that there's only a small group of us at this point that are going back to Capitol Hill to fight this and hope that we can fix it. And I am hoping that by bringing more attention to this and raising funds to help facilitate these trips and this advocacy, that we can make that change. But more importantly, I want to see a change made to all of our healthcare. I want to see universal healthcare come into play so that no one ever has to do this again. No one ever
Yeah.
has to go through what we went through.
Yeah. And for anyone listening to this, is there something they can do now? Can I point them to a link in the description or is
Yes, absolutely. They can go to my website. It's www.aha-us.org. And if we could put that link up, that would be great. And they can donate to this cause so that we can keep up this really great work. And I'm hoping to bring other women on board, powerful women who will help us do this.
That's amazing. I will definitely put that in the description, and I have, like, a few fun questions for the end of
Fun
this, but I
sounds
wanted
good.
to but I wanted to pause and, like, if there's anything else you wanted to chat about that we missed before we go into this quick fun round, I wanted to pass it back to you.
I don't think so. I think I've addressed the things that are most important to me right now.
Okay, amazing. Also, my cat currently is sitting on my left arm. I don't know if you saw her tail just
I
going
saw the
up.
tail going back and forth. At least my beagle
She's
hasn't started howling.
No, thankfully. She's purring, so I hope the mic doesn't pick it up, but what are you gonna do? Okay, so I have 3 questions for you.
Okay.
Number 1, what is the most beautiful thing you've learned doing this work?
Hmm. I think one of the most beautiful things that I've seen is that sometimes people who have no skin in the game, no financial gain from this, have come forward to help us just because they feel so strongly that this is the right thing to do. And I'm really grateful for those people who do this because it is the human thing to do, not because there's money, not because there's recognition, no cameras, no awards, just because it's the right thing to do.
That's beautiful. Number 2 is what is giving you the most energy right now in
Oh
life and
God.
what you're doing? Like, it could be anything.
um,
Yeah.
I would say that my daughter is always my North Star. Her name is Michaela. She's 27 now. And I think a lot of times I would have given up if I didn't have her. Sometimes I was just so sick, so sad that if I didn't have another human being I had to get up for, I might not have gotten up again. And she was a strong kid. She was always an outlier, very clever, very funny, quick witted, and keeps me on my toes. And she's my biggest cheerleader. Um,
Oh,
and in fact, the sad part is that she is sick from this too. My
wow.
daughter also was sickened, but she just
Is
keeps
she
on.
okay now?
No, she has issues with her lungs, and she's had some mental health issues, if for nothing else, watching me go through all of this. A mom who uses
Right.
equipment to breathe, a mom who has a brain tumor, mom who has breast cancer definitely makes a kid worry. You know, is
Yeah.
my mom going to be here when I graduate? Is my mom going to be here when I get married? All of those things. But she's definitely the person that keeps me going.
I love that. And then the last one is what's something exciting you have planned for this year?
Uh, um, I plan on taking on women's healthcare in a really
Mm,
big way. I met some great women in Washington, D.C. this week who are fully engaged in seeing that women's healthcare changes. And I'm hoping that those women come on board in a big way and not just change healthcare for the 9/11 community, but change it for every single woman. So that you, Christina, as you grow up and you need healthcare, you are never turned down or excluded for something you need. I want this to be universal.
that's such an amazing initiative, and If there's any way I can help, let me know. I'm
I
happy to
will.
amplify it wherever needed, because I definitely think that's necessary, and also just wanna say thank you so much for everything you do. It is so brave of you, especially when you're sick and there's so many other things you need to focus on, and so I just wanted to thank you for what you do and for also coming on to share your story and what you're doing. It's so beautiful.
Well, thank you, but I will tell you that what I do is what heals me. This it gives me back my power. My power was taken from me, and this gives me back my power to empower other people. So it benefits me as much as it benefits the people I help.
Well, either way, it's very inspiring, and thank you
Thank you.
for coming on. Hopefully, we can do a part 2 once you've accomplished your goal
I would
of
love to.
universal healthcare.
Yes.
But yeah, would love to stay in touch, and thank you so much again for coming on.
Thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciate this because what you're doing for us is so important. So, gratitude.